Alex Reed woke up to the sound of his phone. He was in no hurry to answer it, knowing that the calls were unimportant, at least for now. His coffee was cold on the table, and the laptop he usually used to check the latest news and reports was closed. Everything changed 3 days ago. In just a couple of minutes, his life turned upside down. What had seemed like a stable career in the investment business was now nothing but disappointment and feelings of deep betrayal. How did this happen? He was sacked from Mycroft & Rowe, the city's most prestigious investment firm. In an instant, his reputation was in tatters like an old glass. Being publicly fired on suspicion of financial misconduct was the first step. The next was deleting all his data from the company's database. But what hurt most was the claim that swept through the industry. The accusation that he had leaked secrets to competitors. Alex was dumbfounded. He knew he had never done anything like this, and he felt suffocated not only by the lies, but also by the lack of support from colleagues he had considered friends. In moments of crisis, the only ones left were those who hated him, or at least rejoiced at his downfall. He got out of bed, unbuttoned his shirt, and walked to the mirror. In the reflection, he saw his tired but strong figure. He was young, successful, and ambitious. He knew he could justify himself if he wanted to, but why, if the whole world continued to spin, ignoring his pain? The bell rang again. The name Thomas appeared on the screen. "I can't now," Alex thought, but answered anyway. "Alex, are you crazy?" Thomas's voice was irritated, as it always was when he knew things weren't going according to plan. "You and I both know who was involved. You couldn't have done it. You're not that stupid." Alex froze for a second. Thomas, his cousin, always played games. Games he won, even if it meant lying, manipulating, and even ruining lives. Alex couldn't yet understand what role Thomas had truly played in this tragedy. "It's not my fault, Thomas," Alex said slowly, feeling his fingers tighten in frustration. "You have to understand that. I would never do that." Thomas chuckled on the other end of the line. Yes, you are so righteous," he laughed, but the laugh was cold, with notes of contempt. "I don't believe you. Okay, be as always. But don't expect help from me. You are in this shit yourself, and you yourself must choose how to get out of it." With that, he hung up, leaving Alex standing with the phone in his hand. What did he mean by that? Alex felt something inside his heart break, as if some inner barrier had been breached. His brother had never been a friend, but now he was an enemy, and that feeling struck right at the very center of his dignity. But what happened now? How could he clear his name? Alex couldn't believe that his world had collapsed because of some kind of setup. After he had learned to carefully analyze every number, every financial line that had passed for so much time, this blow was so powerful that he could hardly believe what was happening. He was sure that something was wrong with his case. Someone was manipulating the data. But who? On the second day after his dismissal, Alex gathered all his strength and went to his office, although he knew he would not return there. He took a few of his personal belongings, including an old notebook with notes that he always carried with him. He was full of thoughts and ideas that could help him in this matter, but now, with his reputation under attack, he did not know where to start. As he closed the door behind him, his phone vibrated again. This time it was a familiar number. Sarah Nelson. She had once worked as a PR consultant for a major firm and had helped Alex with many difficult negotiations, but they hadn't crossed paths recently. "Alex," Sarah's voice was wary, "I heard you got fired. Is that true?" Alex closed his eyes. Everything again. More questions and pity. He didn't want to feel like a victim, but now he needed to find a way to restore his reputation. "Yes, it's true," he said bitterly. "I didn't mean to do anything like this, but now it seems I'm in the middle of this scandal. I need to find out who's behind this." "If you really are innocent," Sarah said, "then someone is trying to set you up. I can help you. I have my own sources." He nodded, feeling a strange spark of hope. There were still people in his life who believed in him. "Thank you," Alex said, looking out the window at the storm raging outside. "I didn't know who to trust, but maybe you're the one I need right now." Thus began his journey back. A journey that would take him through the thorns of betrayal, accusations, and disbelief. But he was ready to fight. After all, only those who were ready to fight could return to life without losing themselves in the process. There was only one thing left to do: uncover the truth, despite everything he had been through. The next day, Alex met Sarah at one of the old cafes on the corner of Pine Street. It was a small but cozy place that they both loved for its atmosphere. Quiet, not so crowded, and you could talk without fear of someone listening. Sarah came with a laptop on which she had already prepared several documents. There was determination in her eyes. She was clearly not going to leave him to his fate. "This is what I managed to gather," she said, opening her laptop and scrolling through the pages. "I talked to several people who worked with you. They are all sure that you couldn't have done this. But there is one detail that is bothering me. Listen, Mycroft and Rowe employees. Some of them, Sarah claimed, clearly showed that someone had used his name to cover their tracks. It's impossible," Alex muttered. "I've always kept track of all my projects. I couldn't have made a mistake, much less leaked the data." Sarah frowned and turned the screen so Alex could take a closer look at one of the documents. It was a report on one of the projects Alex had been working on a month ago. Everything looked perfect, but her eyes were caught by one thing: a signature that wasn't his. "Alex, you didn't sign that report," she said, her voice turning serious. "Someone forged your signature and attached it to the file. Given your position, you're now the prime suspect." Alex felt the blood drain from his face. This was worse than he could have imagined. Someone had set him up. But who? "This all seems too deliberate to be an accident," Sarah continued. "If we can prove the signature is forged, we might be able to uncover this man." Alex thought as he looked at the document. He knew that it held the key to his exoneration, but to get to the truth, he had to break through the wall of distrust and contempt that surrounded him. "I don't know who could have done this," he finally said, "but I need to find out, and I'm willing to do anything to get my name back." Sarah looked at him with understanding and nodded. "We'll start by gathering more evidence, but you have to be prepared. Someone probably wants you to disappear. And this isn't just an accident." Sarah suggested a meeting with one of her old contacts, who was familiar with the internal affairs of Mycroft and Rowe. This person worked in the security department and was one of those who could tell who had access to important data and could change documents. Later that evening, Alex and Sarah met him in the abandoned office of an old firm that had once handled legal matters. The place was half empty, with the remains of documents and dusty shelves. At first glance, it seemed that the office had not been used for a long time, but it was the perfect corner for a meeting. "Alex Reed," the stranger said, approaching the table and extending his hand. "I'm glad you came. I've heard good things about you, but now it all seems less important." "I understand why you think that," Alex said, trying to contain the tension. "But I need to know who's behind the falsification of the reports. And, if possible, proof of who my enemy is." The man was a man of few words. He simply opened his laptop and showed Alex and Sarah access to the company's internal network. He couldn't divulge much, but the few documents he provided were useful. Alex quickly scanned them with his eyes. "This one," Sarah said, pointing to one of the images. "This is what you were looking for, Alex." On the screen were log files with recorded user actions within the company network. The data showed that on the day of the report forgery, several employees connected to the system from different machines. One of them was clearly not from the analytics department, but from the legal department. So they set it up so you were the prime suspect, the stranger said, leaning toward the screen. You were the first one to start working on this project, and when the documents were forged, your name was the only one that could be put on the final report. And that's not all, he added. This person most likely had personal motives. Alex turned to him sharply. Who is this? Sarah leaned over to take a closer look. She saw a name, Thomas Reed. Alex froze. His heart sank as he realized that another blow was in front of him. Everything pointed to his cousin. It was he who had framed him, using his name and trust. Are you sure? Alex asked, keeping the confusion out of his voice. 99%. The simple answer was terrifying in its obviousness. He was here a couple of days ago, and his traces remained. Alex sat in his office, looking at this report, which now represented betrayal to him. He didn't know what to do. His brother, who he once considered a friend, was the one who had ruined his career. He was the one who had been behind his humiliation. But how to prove it? How to break this wall of lies if his name was still tarnished? He closed his eyes, trying to comprehend the situation. All his efforts seemed futile. But if he gave up now, his life would remain ruined. He was ready to fight, but to do so, he needed to find solid evidence. And, most importantly, he had to find a way for the whole world to know about it. Not just him and his loved ones. Sarah, he said, suddenly remembering her, we have to act. We can't wait for Thomas to plot against me again. She sat across from him, studying the papers they had found together, and seemed to still be trying to formulate a plan. She looked up and saw his determined face. I know, she said slowly, as if weighing each word. But you have to be careful. You know that if we go public, you'll be a target. You'll be accused of trying to restore your reputation by ruining someone else's. Alex shook his head. I can't live knowing that Thomas did this to get into the seat that was meant for me. I can't let him win. He stood up, leaning his elbows on the table, and clenched his fists. You're right, Sarah said, standing up as well. But if you decide to reveal this, you'll need to be smart about it. We'll need to get around all the traps he's set for you. You can't just throw him in the towel. You'll need proof that's irrefutable. Alex understood her words. But what if they weren't enough? What if his father and colleagues didn't believe that Thomas was the one manipulating all of this? I'm willing to take the risk, he said, turning to Sarah with a determination that left no room for doubt. I'll find a way to see this through. Sarah sighed, picked up a few documents and placed them in front of him. Okay, let's start with me asking a few more people. We need to figure out who was with Thomas at that moment. Who's supporting him? Alex nodded. He knew they were just starting to dig, and there would be many difficult moments ahead. But he was ready. Several weeks passed. Alex did not sit idle. He spent sleepless nights analyzing every detail, every mistake that Thomas could make. Every move of the enemy was noticed, every trace was followed. Every word spoken during meetings could be the key to uncovering his plan. One morning, Alex received an unexpected call. It was an old acquaintance from a law firm where Thomas had once worked. He said he had information that could change everything. He suggested meeting. When Alex and Sarah arrived at the designated location, he knew it was serious. They met in an underground cafe located in the heart of the city, a place where they could talk without being overheard. The man who was waiting for them looked worried, as if he knew his actions could have consequences. I can't talk for long, he said, looking around, but what I'm going to tell you is important. Your brother, Alex, he not only manipulated the reports, but also transferred the data to third-party companies. The company's security systems were hacked, and all the documents went to the accounts of foreign investors. Alex felt his heart beat faster. He could imagine the consequences. If his brother was selling secrets, it meant his betrayal wasn't just about his career. It was about national security. "Who did this?" Alex asked, trying not to show his excitement. "I don't know, but I think you can find traces in the international database. But you have to be careful. You're playing with fire." Alex realized that this was another facet of the crime he would have to face. He couldn't just step aside knowing that his own brother was involved in international schemes. "We'll do it," he said, meeting Sarah's gaze. "But we need more evidence, and we need to make sure this trail leads to Thomas." Sarah nodded. They were now even closer to the truth, but the dangers and risks increased with every step. Alex sat in his office, looking over the documents he had managed to collect. A mixture of determination and anxiety bubbled inside him. This was his chance, his one and only chance, to get back everything he had lost and prove his innocence. But at the same time, he knew that stepping into this pool meant putting everything on the line. His career, his reputation, maybe even his freedom. He rose from the table and went to the window, looking out at the city that had once seemed like home to him. The whole world seemed too big for one man, and even more so for someone who was on the verge of collapse. "Sarah," his voice was tense but calm, "you're right. We can't just back out. This isn't just my path. It's a chance to restore justice. And I won't let Thomas get away with it." Sarah, sitting opposite him, put down her papers and looked at him with understanding. "Are you ready for this?" she asked, as if testing his resolve. "You know it won't be easy. We're facing a huge machine, and it won't stop at destroying you." Alex sighed. He knew what he was getting into. But in recent weeks, he had felt like this was the only way to regain control of his life. "We have to prove that he manipulated not only within the company, but also with external forces. I need this whole game to come to the surface. Thomas can't continue to hide." Sarah nodded, her eyes full of determination. "But we have to be smart. He knows how to work this, and if we make a mistake, he will use it against us. We have to approach this with caution. We have to clear all the paths and collect evidence that will be a fatal blow to him." Alex looked again at the documents lying on the table. In front of him was a complete picture of the criminal scheme that Thomas had organized with outside investors. All the evidence was in place. Now there was only one thing left to do: bring the matter to an end. He took out his phone and dialed his lawyer's number. "We're ready," he said, not waiting for a greeting. "We must act as soon as we have all the evidence. Let him not think that I will simply give up." "Okay, Alex, I'll take action," the voice on the other side replied. "But be prepared for the consequences to be severe. We can't let him manipulate this process." He hung up and went back to his thoughts. Sarah watched him closely, realizing that their lives were now entering a new phase. "You're not alone," she said, seeing Alex getting lost in his thoughts again. "We'll get through this together." Alex felt her support, and at that moment he realized that despite all the pain and suffering, he did not need to be afraid. He could trust her. She was his hope and support. A few days later, Alex returned to the office, already knowing what needed to be done. He prepared all the materials and handed them over to the lawyer. With this step, he finally realized that not only his future was at stake, but also the future of his family. He thought again about his brother, Thomas, how everything had changed. They had grown up together, shared dreams and goals. But now there was a gap between them, and it was growing wider. His father called. Alex couldn't avoid this conversation. Are you crazy? His father's voice was filled with disappointment. Don't you understand what you're doing? You're destroying everything we've built. Don't be an idiot, Alex. Your reputation is all we have. Alex felt a chill run down his spine. He knew his father was on Thomas's side. He understood that for the older generation, this fight was not just a family conflict. It was also about business, about position in society. But his own dignity was truly more important. "I cannot remain silent, Father," he said with cold determination in his voice. "Thomas has deceived us all. I will not cover for him." "You don't understand what you're doing," Father repeated, but this time his voice was quieter. "You're risking everything." Alex hung up the phone, feeling the tension building inside him. But he knew he couldn't back down. He couldn't afford to live a lie. Meanwhile, Sarah continued her work, and within days, she and her lawyer had access to additional data that confirmed their suspicions. The hidden transactions, the false reports, the illegal deals, it was all there. "We're ready," Sarah said when they met to discuss the plan. Alex nodded. It was all on the edge. He could feel it coming, and he couldn't afford to make a mistake. Alex stood in front of the courthouse. 1,000 thoughts were racing through his head, but one thing was clear. If he lost, he would lose everything. But if he won, he would clear his name and perhaps be free of this endless persecution. The courtroom was silent. He knew the whole system was out to get him, but he wasn't going to give in. When his voice was heard, under oath, he was full of determination. "I am innocent," he said, looking everyone in the room in the eye. "This is not just a mistake. This is betrayal. I was forced to endure the lies and manipulations of my own brother. But now I am here to stand up for my truth." The judge nodded and the trial began. Everything was decided. Alex stood in the hallway, waiting for the final court hearing to begin. His heart was beating faster and faster. Today was the deciding moment. Either he would get back everything he had lost, or he would be left empty-handed and with a torn reputation. He felt the weight of all the consequences of his choice, but despite this, he was ready for any outcome. When he entered the room, there was only one question in his head. Can I win? But outwardly, he held firm. He knew that behind this process were years of his life, his struggles, his losses. He could not afford to fail. The judge announced the start of the session, and everyone present stood up again. Alex couldn't help but notice how his brother Thomas, sitting on the other side of the room, looked at him. There was something worried in his gaze, but also confident. He felt that he was going to win. But Alex wasn't the same. He wasn't the type to give up anymore. He knew the truth was on his side. And even if it cost him everything, he had to stand up for it. The day passed in a flurry of lawyers' presentations, evidence, and cross-examinations. Alex listened intently, feeling the tension building. He knew the whole game depended on which cards he played in the final part. When it was his turn to speak, he stood up, as if casting aside all doubts. There was determination in his voice. "I'm not here just for my reputation," he said, looking everyone in the room in the eye. "I'm here for the truth, for my family, for my future life. My brother used me and my gullibility. He manipulated me into believing that I could be part of his scheme. But I will not remain silent. My life and my integrity are more important than his desires and ambitions." There was silence in the judge's chambers. Alex felt the pressure disappear as he spoke his final words. "I ask the court to find me innocent, and I ask for a chance to clear my name. This is not just about winning in court. This is about the truth that we all need to hear." The judge called a break, and everyone in the room left. Alex stood in his place, feeling everything building up inside him. This was the moment of truth. Court returned, the decision was announced. The court rules. In the case of financial fraud, the charge against Alex, a citizen of the city, is dismissed. However, the charge against Tom. The judge paused for a moment, then continued. Gladys is charged with manipulation of corporate funds and using inside information for personal gain. He is sentenced to 2 years in prison. Alex felt his chest fill with relief, but also with a heavy realization. He had won, but he had lost a lot along the way. Thomas had been convicted, but that was no joy. It was simply the end of a long and painful journey. Several months had passed since Alex had won the court case. His life had slowly begun to recover, although it was still far from what it had been before. His reputation was slowly being restored, but his credibility in business was once again doomed to take a long time to recover. Sarah continued to be there. She became not only his colleague, but also his friend. Their relationship grew into something more than just a professional connection. She was his support in the most difficult moments. One day, Alex sat in his new office, a mountain of paperwork in front of him, and thought about his future. His old world had been destroyed, and even though he had regained his independence, he knew he had to start from scratch. But now, at least, he was free. His gaze fell again on the window, towards the horizon, and although he had already been through so much pain and disappointment, he knew one thing. He would fight again. He would build and rebuild again. A new path was just beginning. Sarah walked into the office, and their eyes met. "How are you?" she asked, approaching his desk. Alex looked at her and, despite all his worries, smiled. "Everything will be fine," he said. "This is just the beginning." And at that moment he realized that the most important thing was not what was lost, but that he could move forward again, no matter what.